were two Cornel West tweets. There was one that I read and I was like, oh, this is based. I retweeted it. And then Gavin was like, oh, yeah, the first one people were not as happy with. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I did not know there was a first one. So we can get to that. He says, the escalation of the barbaric violence in the Middle East must stop. The vicious Israeli occupation and the ugly Palestinian retaliation results in the killing of precious innocent people on both sides. We must have a lasting peace based on justice, truth, justice, love, Israel, Palestine. Yeah, see, I could definitely see where people are going with this. It's not the kind of strong response you want to see from Cornel West, who's the guy who's going to have the best response on this, right? Like, it kind of it was slightly better than what Bernie Sanders offered, but not by enough. I can see why people thought this was like both sidesing it, although I see also what Cornel West is trying to do. He's not trying to glorify like an act of terrorism, but he's also trying to underscore that there is a occupation. It just kind of makes them like equitable, and when the scale of what the Israeli occupation is doing to the Palestinians is so much greater than the attacks of Hamas in terms of tragedy and lives lost, and basically every other metric of suffering. So yeah, I kind of see where people are coming.
Yeah, so this was the first Cornel West statement after the violence in Israel and Palestine, and a lot of people were upset about this. And I think you're, correct, Zach, in articulating why some people were upset by it. It's not the worst statement in the world. It's not like Cornel West is coming out here and saying, we need to unequivocally support and arm Israel like RFK did, who we'll get to in a second. So don't get me wrong. I mean, this is still like, miles better than what you're used to from your average politician. But I do understand why, why people had an issue with this, specifically saying the ugly Palestinian retaliation results in the killing of innocent people. If you want to critique Hamas specifically, I think that's okay, because Hamas does not speak for all Palestinians, and their actions do not reflect the strategic calculations or, whatever you want to say, of all the Palestinian resistance. So I can understand why people had an issue with that, saying the ugly Palestinian retaliation, where it's like you're referring to a few, civilian deaths or murders from Hamas, but the, vast majority of Palestinian retaliation has not been of that variety. It's just those examples are being highlighted by the media right now to make it seem like the entire Palestinian resistance is this barbaric, bloodthirsty, war criminal filled, basically like ISIS or something. You know what I'm saying?
Which
That's
is
what
crazy,
the media,
given the fact that they are literally like the quote we just read at the beginning of the story.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, like it is really unfortunate, and I really do feel bad for the innocent lives that were lost in Israel. Obviously, those people are not 100% necessarily complicit in the crimes of the government that they live in, much like, here in America.
Do you guys want to go and get shot for the war crimes of the United States?
Right, exactly. In the same way that, us in America, we're not complicit for the various crimes that our country and our government are committing abroad. And obviously, we would not deserve to die in a terrorist attack if someone, committed one against our country and we were the victims of that. But, that can be true while also recognizing that the response from Israel is going to basically devastate so many more innocent Palestinians. Like literally, they're basically going to use this as an excuse to destroy Palestine, at least in my opinion, to the best of their abilities. Basically, use this terrorist attacks from Hamas and this violent resistance from Hamas as an excuse to complete their imperial project and completely wipe the remainder of Palestine off the face of the map. That's what I fear. And that just needs to be kept in mind that, like, however, as tragic as the Israeli civilian deaths are, the disproportionate, casualties on the Palestinian side are going to so far outweigh whatever the Israeli life lost are. And that's important to keep in mind. Also, I've heard a few people saying that these Israeli citizens, they were killed because they were Jewish. And I actually disagree with that. I think they were killed because, they're part of a colonial settler state, which is currently occupying and annexing, invading, and committing a genocide against the Palestinian people. I don't actually think it has as much to do with the Israeli people's religion. And while I'm certainly not denying that vicious anti-Semitism exists within Hamas and probably within much of the Islamic world, I think it's fair to say that the people specifically of Palestine, it's not so much as they're anti-Semitic or they're anti-Jew, it's that they're anti the people who are occupying their land, kicking them out and killing them. So those people could be Christians, they'd probably be anti-Christian. Those people could be Hindu, they'd probably be anti-Hindu. I think it has more to do with the subjugation than the religion. And, to whatever extent anti-Semitism does exist from the Palestinian side, Islamophobia also exists just as much from the Israeli side.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what people do when they create a caricature of their enemies, right? And the Israeli government has tried desperately to create a caricature of the suffering uh, Palestinian people as like vicious anti-Semitic terrorists, right? That there's a huge concerted effort of that, and it's it's crazy because people seem to not be willing to engage with the fact that Israel is like running a terror or like their own terror state, right? Like the United States is obviously a terror state, of course we are, but so is Israel, right? And I just think we have to understand that we have to recognize what we're doing and what we've done. There's a reason that Donald Trump wanted to create like a peace settlement with Benjamin Netanyahu that continued to further subjugate the Palestinians. It's all a part of our nefarious geopolitical plan. It's not about our desire to protect, the lives of people who practice the Jewish faith in Israel, right? Like as much as they want to like pretend it, it's like building the Iron Dome was like this effort to like protect the onslaught of like the Jewish faith in Israel. Like, no, it wasn't. It was to create a asset of the United States or to continue to militarize an asset of the United States in the Middle East. And, it was to expand the power and land mass of Israel for the benefit of the largely for the benefit of the Jewish population, which is the other thing that's fucked up is like you are literally a second class citizen in Palestine, and they do discriminate based off of your faith, off of your religion, right? And we wouldn't accept that in any other situation, right? We wouldn't accept an ethno state, right? And people will say, oh well, Israel is like trying to create a Jewish state, but it's like, bro, we don't accept religious states in this like day and age in 2023. Like we can't just be like, oh, America is going to be a Christian nation. Like I wouldn't accept that. Like I wouldn't I don't believe in creating like ethno states. And the fact that that's just kind of like the expressed intent, I think is also something that people need to grapple with.
Right. Right. And while I can sympathize, especially like after the Holocaust, with the Jewish people's desire to have a kind of like a safe space, essentially, like I understand the point of Israel. That doesn't just give you an excuse to commit as many human rights atrocities as you want and subjugate people and create an apartheid state. Like, the intention might have been good and it might be sound, but again, that doesn't just give you carte blanche to commit atrocities and subjugate an entire population by creating an ethno state and then an apartheid. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Zach. And let's get to some of the responses to this Cornel West tweet, because like I said, a lot of even his biggest supporters were pretty pissed off. Here's our friend of the show, Afeni, saying, "This is the most disappointing shit I have ever seen. One side has actively and aggressively stolen land from the other. One side beats people while they pray in one of the holiest places in Islam. Palestinian people should be defending themselves." What do you think about that, Zach?
I mean I agree with that in the sense that see, it's tough, right? Because like I agree Palestinians should be defending themselves, and I agree that they don't have a lot of other options, but I also think that it's tough to run for the president of the United States and say, I stand with the people who just shot a bunch of innocent civilians. Like I think that both things can be true. And that's why I appreciate the second tweet that Cornel West put out, the second statement that kind of fully lays out his position. I found myself very much agreeing with that perspective of Dr. West. And I mean, I look, Afeni is a great activist, good friend of the show. I definitely see what she's saying here. I 100% agree that the Palestinian people should be defending themselves. I just think that Cornel West is trying to distance himself from the or trying to distance himself and also distance his support for something like the Palestinian liberation, instead of having it be perceived as support for Hamas, as you know what I mean, and the actions that they're taking. Because Gavin and I were talking about this before the show, but obviously there was the music festival that was happening just a few miles away from Gaza. That, and obviously we've pointed out it, was the world's largest open air prison, 2 million people that were, being persecuted and forced to live in second class citizenry and dehumanized and persecuted. And then, obviously there was a terrorist attack where where Hamas members shot up the people that were attending the music festival. And it's a lot of people are like, I would quite simply not go to a music festival here. And it's like, yeah, I kind of see that point of view, but it's also like these were just regular people that were just out here going to a music festival. This is where they live. This is where they were born. They're probably, not meaning to be objectively political. Like, were they the best target? Were they the only target? I get that they were nearby and the people were looking to make a statement and this is war. And that was their calculation. But I think that Cornel West, as a lifelong, outspoken peace activist, was trying to distance himself from that particular act of violence and not appear like he was celebrating that in any way.